Alrighty, so week 3 in CIT82, we're going to move from concepts to more of a hands-on experience this week. So for this item, and you're going to actually, for the lecture, I'm going to have you use a YouTube video, not lynda.com. And the reason I moved away from lynda.com for the HTML part of this is there was a class on lynda.com, which I think is still really good, and you can cover it if you want. It's called HTML Essentials, and it's one of those classic text concepts. It's a little bit older, but it's just fundamental. And the reason I'm going to move away from that is that in reviewing the content that Todd has, as again I've talked about, that class follows this one logically, and for many students that are already enrolled, if you haven't, think about it. That class really, Todd, that's what you cover in that class. So I just want to give you a kind of a gentle introduction here. So we're going to use this course, and in this course from Traverse Media, we're going to watch the first 33 minutes, and then we'll watch the second half in the next item. And in this case, what you're going to do is actually code along. So I have it marked here at about that point, about the 33-minute point that you'll need to go to, and it's right before or maybe right after he starts talking about tables. Okay, so it talks about H1s, talks about lorem ipsum text, and in this case he's using an editor. He's using Sublime Text, and that's actually our next item. So I think it's good for this item that we do a little old school. And what I mean by old school is you're actually going to code along with this first part in GitHub, the web interface. And for those of you that have done any HTML coding so far, this will feel old school to you. And if you haven't done it, you know, it's good to have this experience. And even if you have, I think it's good to actually have to write this code out completely. And so what I did is I created a HTML directory in lectures. I want you to call this file the index.html. No uppercases, only lowercases, no space, .html. And then you'll code along in your file, right? And then you'll end up giving me your link here as the submission for your lecture. But as I alluded to as I started talking about this, right, this is old school because the next item we're going to do in our class, and some of you may choose to actually do this item first, which is fine. You know, I can't dictate the way you do it. I'm just giving you my 2 cents here. I actually modified this item to not include command line. The next item we'll talk about command line. Because on this item, what I want you to do is select an editor you're going to use. And I talk about that I'm going to use VS Code. And I recommend that if you don't already have an editor that you love, and even if you do, you want to try something new. And as I alluded to in the attendance for week 2, Todd actually uses WebStorm. I use VS Code. Many students use Sublime Text. In the video, he used Sublime Text. I also notice students often use Atom. The cool thing about most of these editors is they're either free or they, as in the case of WebStorm, you have to set up a student account. But most of them, for a pretty high function, are free, right? Which is awesome. So for the hands-on, what I want you to do is determine which editor you're going to use, and then just take a print screen of it. Now, let me just say this as a heads up, right? If you choose to code in the editor locally, the lecture, just know that next week we're going to end up cloning these repos, so we'll end up putting it in a different location. So if you do that, just be heads up that we're going to end up copying that information down. So again, you get to do it whichever way you want. Oh yeah, notice in here too, he does some lorem ipsum text, and the editors will help you write that. But there's also websites that will do this for you, and it will generate. Let's see if this is one. Right? Yeah, you can just copy and paste some text if you want, rather than to write all that out, because that's not the idea. here. Again, that's the benefit. You see the benefit, the productivity gains that you get with an editor is doing that. So I know I'm popping around a little bit here, but just FYI, I think it's good to do that first half with just using this interface, because it reminds us, right, how beneficial the editors are, which we're about to benefit from. But if you choose to do it the other way, I won't really know either way. But for this item, for the hands-on, I want you to go ahead and either download or tell us which one you're going to use, take a print screen of that, right? Embed it like we have before, right? And talk about, why you chose this, and maybe do some additional research on your own here if you want. I mean, I'm going to put like 75 words writing. I'm not going to make you do replies to this one, but I just want you to select your editor of choice here that you're going to use. Okay, so that's the hands-on. Now let's talk about the last one, which this week is also going to feel a little hands-on-y. Okay, so now that we have the editor, we need to actually install Git and determine your command line interface. Okay, so installing Git's pretty straightforward. You go, and I give you a link here, right? So what I want you to do is install. And some of you may have already installed Git. That's fine. If you haven't, it's time that you do. And when you go to the link I've given you here, as an example, it shows me the Mac version. It also shows me the Windows or the Linux version, which, by the way, VS Code also runs on these three major operating systems, as I believe WebStorm, as Sublime, I'm not sure, and Atom, I think, does. But again, I'm more familiar with VS Code. So you're going to install this, right, so what we've been doing thus far, just contextually to help you understand, we've been using GitHub, right, and we've been using the web interface. So over the next week, after this week, we will be then moving to where we have you clone these repos and have them locally, and then you'll end up doing a process, what we call a workflow, to then push this code to the web. And this is the way, ultimately, as you're writing code or dealing with code, the way it works. We've been doing just kind of baby steps with you, but we're going to end up doing it the way it should be done. Okay? So once you have completed that, now, part of Git, and it depends here on your operating system, right? So the other thing I want you to do is determine your command line interface. And they are somewhat related, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I have Windows running, but first I'm going to show you the Mac side. I don't know what I haven't asked yet. I should probably, and probably in that first week one hello, I could go back and look at what most people are using. I think it's Windows, but it could be a variety. So when you get the editor, at least in my case of VS Code, and in the case of WebStorm and Atom, I think, or I'm not sure about Sublime, you also get an interface onto the command line, and the command line is what you're going to need to know to do Git commands in the coming weeks. So now I just want you to, this week, after you install Git, is determine your command line interface. Now, if you're on a Mac, this is simple. It's just terminal, and you can't see this, but I'm just going to go down on my Mac, or you could go to search on Mac and you could type terminal, right? You'd find it. So this is the command line interface I will use, but I could use, sorry, I actually don't use this on the Mac, and I'll show you why in a minute, but for the Mac this is totally fine. You could use this, and here's a command I'm going to actually have you end up running just to show that you got Git installed. So it'd be Git once it's installed, and by the way, if you're on any time you install, if you happen to open a command line, install Git, you generally have to close the command line, reopen it for Git to register into your command line. But again, most of you may just be for the first time coming into the command line after you install it. So if I do Git, that command, and I pass it a parameter called version, oh, actually, my bad. And I'm going to use the up arrow here. And what you can do is actually do 2 dashes to do this. So git -- version will give you the version of Git that you're using, and that's the print screen I will want you to take. So again, I'm talking to you about the Mac, but what I typically do, and I'll just bring up, in this case I was showing you a minute ago, VS Code, right? I'll just go up and do integrated terminal or terminal. Oh, so let me just back this in a little bit so you can see it. Sorry, I didn't already do that. So what happens on VS Code, and I really like this, is that this terminal actually comes built, not built in, but it comes connected already. And what I could do is actually in here, and all I had to do is do view integrated terminal or integrated terminal, depending on the version. That I noticed on Windows it looks a little differently, but it's the command, you can see it to show that. And then you don't have to have any particular folder. I'll show you later how to do how to open folders and do other things. But I could also do that same command here. I'm still on my Mac, right? So just showing you on at least on the Mac and on Windows, there's going to be two ways you can get to the terminal. So now let me switch over to my Windows setup here. So here I have Windows set up. I'm going to do a clear just so it has this here. And I have VS Code already running on my Windows terminal, or my Windows station. And inside of here, and we could talk about, because it says bash when you're on Mac, actually it means something a little different than it does on the PC. But part of what you get on the PC side when you install GitHub is you get git bash. And let me actually make my Windows screen, and I'm using, by the way, VirtualBox here on my my Mac to run Windows. But once I install not just VS Code, but once I install Git on my local system, I get a program called Git Bash. And you'll see this here. So Git Bash is kind of the equivalent of what you get over on the Mac side. And here you can run git -- version as well, right? And you can see that there's a different version on Windows as there is on Mac. But the same thing is true on the Windows side, or on the Mac. Windows side is on the Mac, because you can also just use the integrated terminal by going to View and choosing integrated terminal to see that as well. Okay, and that's where you could do the command. So it's actually easier in this example just to take another print screen for this item, but this time I want you to show the integrated terminal, and I want you to show that you have gotten Git installed locally so that we can see what version you're running and that you have it successfully installed. We're going to learn some commands over the next couple of weeks, but some basic ones, by the way, is ls. And this will show you a list of your files. PWD shows you what directory you're in. Change directory, and then you can change into a particular directory, like if I wanted to change into desktop. One nice thing here is once you start typing, if there's something that matches that, because it'll do a search in that directory, you can hit tab, and then it'll do the rest for you, which is kind of nice. Using your up arrow keys, you can cycle through the last commands. Really helpful. So we'll learn more command line, but I'm just kind of giving you, and you actually saw there one of the commands, clear to clear the terminal and make everything go back. Okay, so for this item, like I said, what you need to do is install Git, determine what your command line interface is going to be. It's really up to you. If you want to use the terminal inside of VS Code, you may have in your editor of choice an a terminal already built in, integrated terminal already set in there, so that's fine as well. But then, do a print screen of whatever your interface is, or what your command line's interface is, doing the Git -- version, so we see what version you have, and then discuss, right, any experience you have with command line in GitHub, and if not, right, any experience you have, your experience of doing this part. Okay, so in this case, 150 words about this, plus your print screen and 2 substantive replies. All right, so just looking ahead, this will be the next thing I work on. will be for the second item. Then we'll finish up that HTML. We'll clone your repos locally. And I don't know if I'll change this one or not, but there has been a big change in GitHub because it was purchased by Microsoft over the summer, and there's been a lot of whoa concern about this. And we could, and again, I'm going to review this to see if I'm going to include that next week. But either way, this is your week 3 Monday night item. Have a great one. Talk to you later.